The museum smelled faintly of polished brass, climate-controlled air, and quiet. It was the kind of stillness you didn't find many places anymore, the kind that carried weight, not silence, but reverence, as though every breath you took inside these walls belonged to someone who no longer could. Gene Thompson stepped through the entrance, holding the brim of his olive-drab cap with one hand, the other wrapped around a smooth wooden cane. He moved slowly, but not feebly, with that old-fashioned kind of posture you could only earn the hard way. His shirt was pressed, his collar buttoned, and his eyes, they were somewhere else. He came here once a month, sometimes more. He never told his daughter why. He never stayed long. To most visitors, he was just another elderly man among relics, someone who stared too long at a pair of scuffed boots or lingered by the photograph of a foxhole like he'd been there, because he had. He paused before a display case containing a battered helmet and a muddy field dressing kit. The tag read, "Found in Quang Tri Province, 1968. His fingers curled against the cane, his jaw clenched. Just behind him, the loud click of sneakers broke the hush. Laughter, a scoff. Two young voices, sharp, unfiltered. "Babe, is he lost or something?" Jean didn't turn. Another voice, female, louder, mocking. "God, maybe he thinks this is his living room. I mean, look at him. That hat's older than we are." More laughter. Jean exhaled slowly through his nose. His grip on the cane tightened, but he didn't speak. He knew the type. Young enough to be free of consequence, loud enough to need an audience, and empty enough to fill the room with noise. The couple passed him, Kyle and Brittany. Matching smugness, arms linked. The kind who didn't whisper in sacred places. Kyle elbowed Brittany and nodded toward the name wall in the next room. "Bet his name's carved in there with crazy next to it." Brittany giggled. High, nasal. A laugh meant to be heard. A few visitors nearby turned but said nothing. Jean moved on. He didn't react, because that would have meant they'd seen him. Instead, he walked toward the far wall. The one newly unveiled, smooth black granite, etched with hundreds of names. A few flowers rested at the base. A single folded American flag had been placed in the corner. Nothing grand, nothing loud. He reached it, paused, and there, 2 rows down on the left column, was the name that pulled him here every time. Jack A. Miller, medic, 1968. Jean knelt, slowly, reverently. His cane rested against the wall. His hand hovered over the name, fingertips trembling. "Hey, Jack," he whispered. "I'm back again. You know how I am." The sound of footsteps and laughter faded behind him. The museum remained quiet, but inside him, everything was loud. Brittany's heels clicked across the marble with no regard for the quiet signs posted near the entrance. She was filming now, holding her phone just below her shoulder, speaking into the lens like a lifestyle vlogger. "So this is where all the dusty war stuff lives," she said, half to Kyle, half to her growing list of social media followers. Some dude just kneeled in front of a rock. Totally not dramatic at all. Kyle leaned over her shoulder. "You should tag it Ghost Tour. Maybe he thinks his old squad still hangs around." They laughed again, the sound jarring, jagged. Disrespect worn like cologne. Jean didn't turn. He was kneeling before Jack's name, his fingertips resting gently against the etched letters. The cool stone grounded him, even as the weight behind his eyes threatened to spill. The laughter didn't reach his ears, because he wasn't fully here anymore. He was back there, in a clearing soaked with smoke and silence. He could hear it again, the way Jack used to laugh when the grill flared up during their Sunday barbecues. How he'd wave his tongs and holler to the neighbors like he was hosting a TV show. "You burn it! You buy it!" Jack would yell, and Jean would shake his head, smiling. They enlisted together. Same day, same car ride, same letters tucked into the same breast pockets from the same worried wives. They promised each other, over a bucket of cold beer, that they'd both come back, or neither would. But Jean did, and Jack didn't, and that promise had become a stone he carried inside his chest every day since. Now the wall was the only place Jack ever answered. Every month Jean visited. Every month Jack stayed quiet. But Jean could feel him, just like he felt the other names, men he'd bunked beside, eaten with, prayed beside, in the dark. The wall was where he met them now. And every time he returned, it was like slipping back into a suit that no longer fit, but he still couldn't stop wearing. Sophie, the museum docent, had been watching the interaction from across the gallery. She'd seen Jean come in before, always alone, always reverent. She had also seen them, Kyle and Brittany. They weren't just disrespectful. They were feeding off each other, emboldened by shared cruelty. She crossed the floor calmly, her heels soft on the stone, clipboard pressed against her side like a shield. "Excuse me," she said quietly to them. "Please lower your voices. This area is meant to be visited in reflection." Kyle didn't even look up. "We are reflecting on how old that guy is." Brittany snorted, but then glanced at Sophie's eyes, cool, firm, unwavering. "We'll keep it down," she muttered, but her smirk didn't fade. Sophie said nothing more. She simply turned and walked toward Jean. She would not interrupt his moment, but she would stand near enough to bear witness, to make sure someone did. Jean took a breath, one hand pressed flat against Jack's name. "I miss you, brother," he whispered. "Still do. Every damn day." Behind him, the world still stirred. But now, the room had changed. It had been raining for 3 days in Quangtree. The kind of rain that didn't fall, but crawled, soaked into every seam of your uniform, into your ears, under your collar, into the cracks of your thoughts. The red earth had turned to a thick, sucking mud, and the smell was a living thing. Damp cordite, diesel smoke, blood, and rot. Jean was 27. He crouched low behind a broken embankment, mud to his elbows, sweat soaking his back even in the storm. His helmet was slightly askew from the last shell hit, and his hands were already moving. Fast, practiced, precise. Jack was lying face up on the jungle floor 10 yards away. There'd been a mortar blast. Shrapnel tore through the trees like blades of light, and Jack had pushed another guy out of the way. Now his chest was torn open, his shirt blooming red. "Jack!" Jean's voice cracked as he ran, boots slipping, dodging branches, rifle forgotten somewhere in the underbrush. He dropped to his knees beside him, one hand already on the pressure dressing from his kit. "Stay with me, brother. You're fine. You're okay. You're just winded, right?" Jack's eyes opened slowly. His face was pale, lips trembling. "I can't feel my legs." Jean's heart pounded like a drum inside a locked chest. His hands moved faster, clamping gauze, trying to find where the bleeding was worst. "You don't need to. We'll carry you home." "You'll be grilling steaks by next weekend, huh? Scaring the neighbors." Jack managed a ghost of a laugh. "You always burn the steak." Jean barked a laugh, too loud, too sharp. "I burn yours on purpose." They were both shaking now. Jack coughed, blood flecking the corner of his mouth. "I'm not going to make it, Jean. No, don't say that. I need you to promise me. Take care of Carol. Tell Molly. I was thinking of her." His voice was thinning, each word further away. Jean gripped his friend's hand so tightly it left fingerprints. "You'll tell them yourself. You hear me? You will." But he knew. He'd known from the second he saw him fall. Jack's breath slowed. Jean pressed his forehead against Jack's. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I'll make it right. I'll make it matter." Jack's fingers twitched once, then went still. Rain pelted their faces like needles. Around them, the jungle held its breath. Jean sat there in the blood and mud and memory until someone came and pulled him away. Back in the museum, Jean blinked slowly. His palm still rested on the etched letters. Jack A. Miller, medic, 1968. The marble was cold beneath his hand, but somehow it was warmer than the jungle had been. His voice was barely a whisper. "I kept my promise, Jack. I wrote Molly every year, sent her pictures, called on Christmas. She's a nurse now. Good one. Got a boy who reminds me of you." He cleared his throat. "She's doing fine. But me, I still see it. Every time I close my eyes." Behind him, the gallery had gone still. The couple's laughter had quieted, and something heavier had filled the space. Not silence, but remembrance. The sound of footsteps returned, hesitant now, thinner, the kind of steps people take when the air starts to feel different. Kyle and Brittany had wandered back toward the central gallery, but their voices were softer, like a party that had realized it was being watched. Brittany's phone was down. Kyle's smirk had faded into a tight jaw. Sophie noticed. She hadn't said a word to them since her earlier warning, but her presence nearby was unmistakable, calm and unmoving, like a stone placed deliberately in the stream. Then came a deeper voice, measured, older. Mr. Jacobs, the museum's curator, stepped into the hall from the staff wing, a clipboard in one hand, reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He didn't say anything at first, just watched. He'd seen Jean before, not just on these visits, but in a photograph kept in the museum archives, a black and white shot of two young medics in Vietnam, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning despite the dirt and smoke behind them. One was Jack Miller, the other was Jean. Mr. Carr. Jacobs approached slowly. "Mr. Thompson," he said softly. Jean turned, hand still near the wall, eyes glassy but alert. "Sir," Jacobs said, clearing his throat, "would you allow us to honor your visit today?" Jean blinked, unsure what that meant. Jacobs offered a small, respectful smile. Then he walked to the nearby lectern, tapped the microphone, and addressed the entire room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jacobs said, his voice echoing gently through the marble and glass, "may I ask for your attention for just a moment?" The gallery slowly stilled. Visitors looked up from brochures, stepped away from cases. Even Kyle and Brittany paused near the Korean War timeline display. Jacobs continued, "We are honored today by the presence of Mr. Eugene Thompson, a decorated combat medic who served with distinction in the Vietnam War. He is visiting this wall to remember his fallen friend Jack Miller, whose name is carved behind me." Heads turned toward Jean, who now stood just beside the granite wall, posture stiffened not from pride, but from duty. Jacobs's voice softened. "These names are more than etchings. They are promises. And when someone like Mr. Thompson walks these halls, he isn't here to be seen." A pause. "He's here to remember those who never got to leave the battlefield. And so, if you would join me, I'd like to read 2 names aloud. Names that belong to this wall and to the stories behind it." He stepped forward and read clearly, so it filled the air. Private Jack A. Miller, combat medic, 1968. Staff Sergeant Eugene Thompson, combat medic, returned. There was no applause yet, just stillness, a weight settling over every shoulder. Kyle shifted uncomfortably, his hands sliding into his pockets. Brittany looked down, her face flushed, mouth slightly open, as if she meant to say something but couldn't. Nearby, the little boy clutched his mother's hand a little tighter. Sophie, standing near the wall, met Jean's eyes, and for the first time since he entered, he felt seen. Not stared at, seen. For a long moment, no one moved. Mr. Jacobs stepped back from the lectern, hands folded in front of him, the air around him still and reverent. His voice still hung there, almost visible, like dust in a shaft of light. And then it began, not with applause, not with spectacle, but with motion. A man in a denim jacket and veteran's cap, maybe 70, maybe more, stepped forward from the back of the gallery. He didn't say a word. He just took off his cap, held it against his chest, and bowed his head. One by one, others followed. A woman near the exit paused, turned fully toward Jean, and placed her hand over her heart. A teenager removed his earbuds. A middle-aged father lowered himself to one knee beside his wide-eyed son, whispering something the boy would never forget. Even the couple, Kyle and Brittany, stood frozen near the center exhibit. Kyle looked down at his shoes, jaw clenched. Brittany had lowered her phone long ago. Her face was pale now, the smirk long gone. They didn't speak. For once, they listened. Sophie approached Jean gently, carrying a single white rose from the reception counter. She offered it to him silently. Jean took it with trembling fingers. He turned to the wall again, to Jack. He placed the rose beneath the granite, near Jack's name, beside the folded flag someone had left earlier that week. His voice cracked. "I kept my promise, brother. I did what I could." No one breathed. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, full of presence, full of memory made visible, audible, felt. Then, softly, naturally, a round of applause rose. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. It was the kind of applause given at memorials, at folded flag ceremonies, at funerals of people who should have had more time. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. A young man pressed a coin into the base of the wall, a quiet soldier's tribute. The sound of the clapping faded gently, replaced once again by quiet. Not silence. Respect. Jean nodded once, not in thanks, but in acknowledgement. Of them. Of Jack. Of the weight that, for a few rare minutes, was carried by many. The crowd had thinned. Some lingered at the exhibits. Others filed out, speaking in hushed tones, their steps slower, more deliberate. The world outside would keep moving, but inside the museum, something had shifted. Jean stood alone once more in front of the granite wall, his cane in one hand, the other resting lightly on the stone. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind them, he saw Jack again, not in uniform. Not bleeding on the jungle floor, but standing beside the grill in their old backyard, a beer in one hand, grinning like he'd just told the world's worst joke. Carol's laugh echoed from the porch. Molly toddled across the grass in a yellow dress. They had been boys pretending to be men back then, before the war taught them what the word really meant. Jean opened his eyes slowly, reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small photograph, weathered at the edges, the color faded but still clear. It showed two men in jungle fatigues, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning like idiots beneath the shadow of a chopper. Jean stared at it for a moment, then leaned forward. He tucked the photo just beneath the base of the wall, behind the rose, beneath Jack's name. "There you are, brother," he whispered. "Didn't think I'd forget you, did you?" He straightened slowly, his knees protesting. Sophie was there again, not speaking, simply waiting, like a sentry, like a friend. "I come here every month," Jean said, his voice quieter now, not for her, but for himself. Not because it gets easier, but because it shouldn't. Sophie nodded, eyes misted. "You help others remember too." Jean offered a small, tired smile. "That's the job we got stuck with, the ones who made it back." He turned, walked slowly through the hall. Visitors made space without being asked. Some nodded. Some bowed their heads. No one looked away. Outside, the sun had dropped lower, casting long golden shafts across the parking lot. The world, as it always did, continued. But inside one man's chest, and in the hearts of many who saw him, something had settled. Not peace, but meaning. And sometimes that's more than enough. The museum closed an hour later. Lights dimmed. Displays slept beneath protective glass.
The buzz of overhead fixtures softened to silence, broken only by the faint hum of climate control and the last few janitors passing through with slow, respectful steps. But in the curator's office, Mr. Jacobs sat with a yellow legal pad in front of him. At the top, he had written a single sentence. "Some stories don't end, they echo." He was drafting a new addition to the memorial wall display, a second plaque, one that would not list ranks or awards, but presence.
Sophie had already suggested the title, "The Living Memory," honoring those who carry the names. Elsewhere, the young father who had knelt beside his son that afternoon tucked the boy into bed. The child looked up and whispered, "Was the man with the cane a hero?" The father sat beside him, brushing back his hair. "He still is." The boy nodded. "I want to be like him." The father's throat caught, and he simply held him. Kyle and Brittany didn't post anything that night. The footage Brittany had recorded was deleted. No captions, no reels, just silence. They didn't speak much on the ride home, but when they passed a neighborhood park where kids were playing baseball, Kyle slowed the car. He looked out the window, hands tight on the wheel, then said softly, almost to himself, he was just standing there, and I felt like I wasn't supposed to be. Brittany didn't answer. She was staring out the other window, eyes dry but heavy. They didn't know what to do with what they'd seen, but they knew it mattered, and that was the first step. Gene sat in his living room. The white rose sat in a glass of water on his mantel. The photograph was gone now, left behind. He didn't need a copy. He had every line of Jack's face burned into his memory. The silence in the house wasn't lonely tonight. It was earned. It was shared. A name on a wall isn't the end of a story. Sometimes it's where the world finally learns to listen. Today, we remember, always forward. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of the quiet strength some carry every day, like this video, to honor not just the fallen, but the ones who still remember, tell us where you're watching from, or share a moment when memory made you pause. Subscribe to walk with us through more real stories of dignity, sacrifice, and the hidden heroes among us. Because sometimes the strongest soldiers carry only a name and never stop walking. Click the next story and walk with us again.